All right. Hello, this is Jeff Budd with the UAS Title III Complete to Compete grant program. I'll be the co-host of this UAS College to Career program. Today's topic is the art of mastering a new job. We ask that you send your questions to chat, and at the end of the presentation, I'll let Deborah know your question. The program is being recorded. Let me introduce Deborah Reidman. She's the University of Alaska Juneau Campus Career Services Coordinator, which includes Juneau, Ketchikan, and Sitka, and she's also the Veterans Representative. She has over 15 years of experience working with high school and state job centers and has been working at the UAS Juneau campus for over 8 years with students and alumni. In my opinion, she knows what she's talking about, so I encourage you to pay attention. Let me welcome Deborah.
Hey, thank you, Jeff, and thank you for all of you who have joined us this morning. I'm pretty excited about this session. Of course, I'm kind of excited about all of them, but this being our last session in this series, it kind of ties things up really well. And we all know how exciting it is when you get a new job and you're getting ready to start a new position. So this session is going to cover how can you position yourself during those first few months to ensure that you will be a valued employee. We'll cover some strategies on how best to do that during this session. And as we go along, please feel free to write down any questions that you might have in your notes, as well as put them in the chat box, and we'll be happy to answer those at the end of the session. So again, it is so exciting when you get a new job, but that's just the beginning. So in this session, we're going to cover the following that's listed in What's in It for Me. We're going to talk about how you can start out strong with your supervisor. There are some strategies on how to plan for the first 3 months. Those first impressions of a new employee, both with their supervisor and with your coworkers, is really, really important. So you have this period of time where you can put your best foot forward. Then there's the topic of office culture. We've all been in positions in the past where the culture of the organization is such, and trying to navigate that and how to best position yourself as a new employee in the midst of the office culture is definitely important. So we're going to cover some strategies on how best to do that. Then there's the pitfall of not asking questions. So we'll take a look at what that is involved and be able to help you position yourself in such a way where asking questions is a good thing, not constantly asking questions. So we'll go over a strategy with that. Then in any organization, it's always good to observe the top performers. What are they doing? How are they doing it? So we'll go over some strategies with that. And then there are the traits that identify a person as a star employee. So we'll have a chance to look at those traits, and then we're going to think about how we each can take inventory of how we're doing in those traits and see what we can do to improve perhaps in some of those. And then an important part about a new job, oftentimes that people don't really think about, is the probationary period. Oftentimes companies will have, a 1 to 2 to 3 to a 6 month probationary period. What does that mean? What are your options during that probationary period, as well as what happens when you get to the end of that probationary period? So we'll go over some things about that are important to know. And then last, starting well and continuing well, that's the goal. So this session is going to cover all of those things, and the intent is to give you information and tools and strategies to start out strong in your next new job. So with the first week, the first day, oftentimes supervisors will initiate a meeting with you. And so here's some things that you can do to prepare for that meeting. During the interview, you may have heard from the supervisor what types of things that they are concerned about, what kinds of roles that you're going to play. but also what is going on with the company and the department. What are their strategic priorities? And so some of those may have come across in the interview, but if you didn't write them down, then go ahead and go back into their website and see if you can identify what that particular company's and department's strategic priorities are. And so then you can come prepared knowing some of those things ahead of time. And that's going to set yourself up well for that first meeting with your supervisor when you begin your new job. And the next part is also very important, identifying and clarifying your supervisor's expectations as well as short and long-term goals. Again, some supervisors will bring this up in the meeting, but if they don't, then you're prepared to be able to pose those questions during this very important meeting. So you want to know what are the company's, departments, and this particular position's biggest challenges. What are those things that they want you to maybe get started on? But identifying what those are and then being able to ask some questions, some clarifying questions, just to make sure that you understand what those challenges are. And then what does success look like to them the first week, the first month, and maybe into the third month? This is also really important because you will understand what their expectations are. And as a new employee, knowing what their expectations are and knowing what kind of a strategy that you want to put into place in order to meet those expectations is important. And then right below, asking what metrics will be used to evaluate your performance. The supervisor should be able to articulate this, but if they aren't able to, then at least you pose the question and you might be able to circle back and see if they have an answer to how you're going to be measured with your performance. And this is important to know at the very beginning so that you can plan accordingly. And then lastly, how would your supervisor prefer you to communicate with them? So a lot of people are phone people. So they might prefer a phone call. They might prefer an email. They might prefer a face-to-face. So making an appointment on their calendar and to be able to do that. So just check and see. That's a courtesy to find out how to best communicate because everybody has preferences with that. After 1 month, if your supervisor doesn't have a meeting scheduled with you to check in after your first month, then we covered this in the last session, then request a check-in meeting with them and ask these 3 simple questions. You're going to find out if things are going well, if there's things you need to be doing, and you want to find this out at the very beginning as much as possible. So again, you can position yourself well to have a good performance during your first few months. Now, I reached out to a couple of supervisors that I admire. One is my own, and she has been a supervisor over many positions and has also started new jobs in some fairly high positions. And so she's got a really wide breadth of experience with this topic. And so I asked her what she would prefer new employees to do. What has she been impressed with, as she said. So here are her answers, which I think are pretty great. She says that she appreciates when a new employee is attentive to emails and to-dos from her or the manager, especially in those first few weeks on the job. So as you are working through the different types of duties that you're being assigned and understand what those to-dos are, then paying attention to that and emails that are associated with that is valued. Then also to come prepared with questions at every meeting with the supervisor, even just a few. So those 3 questions that we just looked at in the previous slide, those are some ones that you can start with. There's going to be some others that will come up as well. So just be prepared to come to meetings with your supervisor with some questions. And make sure those questions are questions that you haven't been able to answer. And that way you can reach out and seek their support on answering those questions, but do what you need to do to get the answers or to the questions, and just come with those that you haven't been able to find answers to. And then ask about things like, if I need to communicate with you about something, how would you prefer to do so? That was one of the things that was mentioned in the previous slide. So seeing her include that in her response was good confirmation. And then, are there meetings or committees you expect me to attend, or who can I check with regarding meeting expectations? A lot of times with jobs, especially with new jobs, there are that culture, that office culture, and just the organization's culture. And so, especially with the university as an example, there are a lot of meetings, there are a lot of committees. And so understanding a little bit more about that, and then what are the expectations of your supervisor around those committees and meetings is really important to know. So having that clearly stated by your supervisor as far as which ones they prefer you to participate in, then, and what their expectations are, is important, because again, this is how you start out well at the beginning. Another strategy is to build a 30, 60, and 90-day plan. So as you are starting this new job, part of your job basically is to identify the important actions that you want to accomplish and add a target date. So for the 30-day plan, that usually spells out how you will how you will learn the company systems, the procedures, the people, customers, clients, and overall culture. So as you're putting together your 30-day plan, includes some of these parts of it, the procedures, the people, customers, and especially the systems. And then set a target date as far as how soon or when you want to master some of these and what people you need to get in touch with. So the important part is writing it down, and then you'll have goals that you'll be working towards within those first 30 days. And then in the 60-day, outline how you plan to continue to assess the company and begin to use your strengths. So after a month, you begin to feel a little bit more comfortable, you're more familiar with how the office is working, how the company, how the department is structured, and then you'll be able to really accentuate the strengths that you bring to the position and how those strengths are going to fit in to these different areas. And then the 90-day is how you will take what you've learned and begin to put it into action. So in other words, how will you meet some of the goals you and your manager have agreed upon? So this is where in the 90-day period, you can start to actively engage confidently with some of these areas and be able to begin to master them. And another idea to do is you put together at least a framework for a 30-day and a 60-day and a 90-day plan. Run it by your supervisor. This is another good thing to bring to a meeting. And if there isn't a meeting scheduled, schedule an appointment to review your 30, 60, and 90-day plan. And that way your supervisor can speak into it, because oftentimes, you know, we're trying to learn how things operate, and there could be a few things that you may not be aware of or you may have missed. And so being able to insert those into even any of these plans is definitely to your advantage. That way, you know, you're starting out on the right foot and you're doing what your supervisor would like you to do. Now, the other thing about starting a new job is office culture. Every office is different when it comes to their particular type of culture. And as we know, we spend 40 hours a week in a job. We oftentimes spend more time with our coworkers than we do with our families. So it's really important to try your best to establish some really good working relationships with your coworkers. So here are some suggestions on how best to start off on the right foot with your coworkers. We all know arriving early or on time is important. It's frustrating when you have coworkers that arrive a little bit late. and you had some things you may have wanted to speak to them about at the very beginning that were time sensitive. So just setting up that practice is important to your coworkers. And then as you start your job, and especially that first week, express how excited you are to be joining the team. Everybody is very receptive to somebody who is excited about what everybody is doing, what the department is doing, and what that particular new employee's position and role is in that department. So don't be afraid to definitely express that to the people on your team. Another thing, don't be antisocial. I know sometimes it's hard when you might feel a little shy when you're walking into a new situation and you're not quite sure who to talk to or how to go about doing that. But just feel free to introduce yourself. Oftentimes, supervisors will assign another person to kind of assist new employees by taking them around and introducing them to other staff members. This is a practice that our department does at the university, where every once in a while we'll meet a new employee from another section of our department, and so it's always fun. But if that doesn't happen, then take the initiative to introduce yourself. And this is an interesting point that I came across in my research. It said, don't bother the busy looking ones. So be aware of the people that are really embroiled within a particular task that they're doing, and then being sensitive to that. Find a time where they're not so busy, where you can introduce yourself to them. That's just being considerate. So just be aware of those people at that particular time when you're getting to know the other people on your team. And this kind of goes without saying, but don't do all the talking. Sometimes it's hard when you're nervous or a little anxious to just talk a lot. Some people, that's kind of their response. Other people, it's hard to talk. So depending on what is your particular behavioral type, but just don't do all the talking. Instead, ask questions and then genuinely listen. I think people love to talk about themselves, so take the chance to get to know people by asking them some general questions, and in particular about their role. People love to talk about their jobs as well, so as you ask them questions and then listen to what they're saying, you can take some mental notes of some things about their answers that you want to pay attention to in the future. So write some things down after you get done talking with people so that you can kind of track that information. The other thing, don't turn down invites for coffee or lunch. It takes some initiative on people to reach out and ask you to do something, and sometimes people are a little shy, so if they ask you and then they're rejected, then they may not be inclined to ask again. So do the best that you can to not turn down invites. And then if you can't for some conflict, then see if you can schedule a time at a different date in order to do that. And these are fun. You get some one-on-one time with people to learn a little bit more about them and to learn more about the organization. So definitely take advantage of that. It's also important to show appreciation and commitment. So anytime you have a chance to show appreciation to a coworker for something that they did or an example that they set, then do it. Maybe make some notes along the way of different things that you would like to mention to your coworkers that was impressive or you thought they did a really good job. So take the initiative to show appreciation and commitment. And be considerate. That's just, again, some common sense. But if somebody's on the phone and you have a question that you need answers to right away, be considerate of what they're doing and their time, and then just wait until there is a good time to be able to do that. So they're working, they're trying to get their job done, so we need to be considerate of that as new employees. And then if there is any way that you can offer your help, look for opportunities where you can offer your help if you have some time in order to do that. Or if there's a chance for you to do that, that will give you some more exposure to some things about the department or the company, then that would be a good opportunity for you to do that. Then figure out how everyone likes to communicate. Yeah, some people just love to have chats in, the office area. Some prefer email. I've got an academic advisor right now that she definitely prefers email. So I've learned not to leave voicemails because I get a better response with emails, because I know that is how she prefers to communicate. So sometimes you learn this along the way when you get crickets on the other end with one type of communication. But it's always best too to just ask them, what would you prefer? Would you prefer if I called, left a voicemail, or would you prefer an email? And then they can tell you what that would be for them. And then this is something that we all do not appreciate, is being around a know-it-all. Now, we all have our strengths and we have experiences that add value to us as an employee, but just be very careful about that. You don't want to be seen as a know-it-all. So just kind of check yourself on that as you're in conversations with your new coworkers. And this also kind of goes without saying, but avoid complaining. There could be some things that bother you during these first few weeks, but try not to communicate that with your new coworkers. And if there's something, sometimes people's conversation veers on the negative side. So try to keep conversations in a positive tone so that you won't be interpreted as complaining in some way. And again, common sense, don't goof off. We all have some times where there's breaks, and if those are scheduled breaks, then you can do some things that are not related to your job. But yeah, when you're in your office, make sure that you are working. Make sure that you are doing certain tasks that you've been asked to do, and that you're not goofing off, and you don't want people to see that you're doing that or checking your phone. That's another thing. So during the workday, when there's a lot of things that are going on and a lot of tasks that are expected of you, but if people come in and see you on your phone, then they're going to interpret that as not being very positive. And then avoid trying to impress. I mean, we all want people to have a positive impression of us, but just make sure that it's a genuine impression. It's who you are. You don't need to try to impress people at the time. They just want to see that you are working hard, that you are trying to learn what you can. And then those opportunities to be able to display the strengths and the skills that you have, you'll have opportunities to do that. But just be, a little bit cognizant of this and not try to impress, because people can kind of see that. Here's a few more tips. Set good habits and get organized from the start. Oftentimes when we start a new job, it gives us kind of a chance to reset a bit. So if there's a particular habit that you have had or kind of battled over the past, then this is a time to maybe start some new habits. So it's a fresh start. So put yourself in a position where you can overcome some of those bad habits and start some good habits. Go the extra mile and often look for opportunities for you to do that. Look at a situation, a project, or an assignment, and then ask yourself, is there anything that I can do that will allow me to go the extra mile and often, and what would that look like? Because to prove your willingness to work extremely hard is a good impression for your coworkers and your supervisor. And then we're always trying to figure out what the unwritten rules of the office are. So just be, looking for some of those. They're all a little bit different. And again, I think it's helpful for you to just take some notes on that so that it's a reminder of how you can function within these unwritten rules that you're beginning to discover. And that way you'll be able to position yourself well as part of the team, and things will go more smoothly. And some of these practical things, we see what people are doing, who washes the dishes, which shelves are communal. Sometimes shelves in the refrigerator can be a little bit, people can get territorial about that. It's funny, people put things in the refrigerator in a specific place, and that's kind of their place. It's kind of like in church, when you go to church and there's certain pews and there's people that are sitting in those pews and no one else is supposed to sit there. So same thing with the refrigerator. Sometimes that can be a little sticky. And then if you're a coffee drinker or tea drinker, then find out kind of how to do that. And that way you're fitting into the culture, you're becoming part of it. Now, this is a response from another valued supervisor coworker of mine. She suggested during that first week to connect with your coworkers on a social level, eat lunch in the break room instead of your office. Oftentimes, if you're feeling a little nervous and you're unsure of yourself, it's easier just to eat your lunch in your office and not around people. And then going into a room where there's other people, then you feel like, okay, I hope that they are going to accept me. I hope that it's okay for me to do this. But her point is, by doing this, it helps build trust and rapport. And I thought that was a very insightful comment. You don't really realize how just participating in conversations with your coworkers at a time like lunch can definitely build trust and rapport. So take the initiative to do that. And again, don't stay in your office the entire time reading the handbook. That's something, again, that we might feel comfortable with because we want to learn what we need to learn, but also engaging with other people, sometimes that's a little scary. So it's easier just to focus on the handbook and stay in your office and doing that. But what you can do, in addition to learning the handbook, that's one thing, but schedule meetings with people to get to know them and how their duties overlap with yours. So being able to get a grasp on the expectations of the department, but also reach out to some people that, and you can get some suggestions from your supervisor as to which people that you should do this with. And then you'll be able to better understand their role and how it might overlap with yours. And then you can have some conversations with them with upcoming projects because you've already had a chance to sit down and get to know them and understand what their work is like. This is an important part. You have to be careful with the too much information aspect. Oftentimes when we meet new people and we're very comfortable talking, then we can go into some areas that may not be a good idea to go into at the very beginning. So being too open with your colleagues before you know them well can backfire because you don't know if they are trustworthy or not. So at this stage of the game, just try to stick to the small talk. And once you get to a point where you're comfortable with a coworker and there is mutual trust, then you can maybe open up a little bit more to them. But I have found for myself that usually doesn't happen until 6 months or so, when I feel like, okay, here is somebody that I can open up a little bit more. But for the first part, just stick to the small talk and just be observant of what's going on. Now, here's a pitfall to avoid. Oftentimes you'll be assigned a project. So when you're assigned a project and you're not quite sure what the scope of the project is, what the expectations are, etc., but they've given you this project and they said, okay, here's what you need to do. Let me know if you have any questions. So the first thing, make sure that you can research what you can, dive into it, drill down to the deepest level that you can to find out everything that you can about that particular scope for the project. Think through the project steps. You can Google some key terms and examples, and then you can write down those steps that include what you found through your research. Then visualize the desired result of your task and come up with a general plan of attack. So after you've gone through those first 2 bullet points, then you get to this one, and then you have kind of, you have the content and part of the structure to be able to put things together with a general plan of attack. And then ask your supervisor to help you fill in the blanks. And by doing this, you will show your supervisor that you are a self-starter, but also not afraid to ask questions. Now, those of us on this session right now may have had experiences where somebody was assigned a particular project and that person should have asked some questions along the way, but they didn't because they wanted to prove themselves, which is understandable. But what the end result oftentimes is, if that person didn't reach out to ask questions to clarify a particular part of the project, then it creates extra work for other people, or it delays the completion of the project. So make sure that you're able to ask those questions, take the initiative to do that after you've done as much as you can in order to find the answers. But it's good just to also make sure you're on the same track, or the right track. Then when it comes to how you're going to proceed as a new employee, watch for those top performers and study them. Take notes of what they do, what is especially impressive about what they do, and how you can see how people value their role in the company, and then their performance. So how do they approach problems? Watch them, listen to them, and then go back to your office and take some notes about different approaches that you may have observed that you can learn from. And then what are some things that they do to make decisions? What does that decision-making process look like? And again, check how you make decisions, and then compare notes to decide, is there something you can add to how you make decisions that you've learned from one of these top performers? And then what are some key attributes that you see other people value in this particular top performer? So, and then do a check. Do I have those attributes? Is that an attribute that I can develop? Because with every company, there is that, again, that company culture of what they value, and you need to learn what that is and then be able to also add to that attribute to the company. This is an exercise that I think would be extremely helpful to a new employee. And there's a link that's going to be embedded in the PDF that we'll be sending you, that you can go check these out for yourself, because there's more explanation for each of these. But here are the 20 best traits of a new star employee. So they're listed right here: always willing to take the initiative, possess integrity, etc. We're not going to go through the whole list, but what I would encourage you to do is, as you look at this list of attributes and traits, then check yourself. Like the first one, always willing to take the initiative. Ask yourself, have I demonstrated that? Am I showing that in my job? Possess integrity. Do I have integrity with the different things that I'm asked to do? So if there's maybe some things that you're fudging on, then you need to identify what those are and change course at that point. So this is a good list just to go through and check how you're doing, make some improvements, and then through this, you'll be able to kind of solidify some of these traits as a new employee, and people will begin to notice, and they'll be able to identify those traits that you possess that could be on this list. So now, another thing about starting a new job is oftentimes companies will have a probationary period. And it's typically a period of time after hiring an employee, and it's usually between 30 to 90 days, when an employee is assessed to determine whether he or she is able to satisfy the requirements of the job. So oftentimes, if a company does have a probationary period, then they'll explain a little bit about what is involved with that. But this is a really important concept to grasp, because sometimes employees forget about that probationary period, because you're just excited about starting the job and you're trying to do your best, but you need to be aware that the probationary period, once it's over, that you have established yourself as a valued employee. So the benefit to you as the employee is you also get to evaluate the company. So you can see if this is going to be a good fit, if the environment is a positive environment. So part of the probationary period to you is to be able to evaluate the company. And then again, you should get detailed feedback on your performance. That first check-in with those quick questions is really important because you want to be very clear what their expectations are, because you don't want to get blindsided later with them saying, well, we're going to let you go because of this and this and this, and you had no idea that that was going on, and they had that impression or they made that conclusion about you. The other benefit, yes, you have a job, but you should not ever forget that the first 30 to 60 days or 90 days is a probationary period, and it's important for you to do the best job that you can. Now, the downside to employees is oftentimes, and I don't know if any of you have been in this situation where they don't start benefits until after the probationary period, which is kind of a bummer, but oftentimes that's the case. So you may not receive benefits until the completion of that probationary period. It's also hard to be under the microscope, but it's going to be worth your effort to be able to do the best job that you can with the intent to be able to pass the probationary period. And because of that, as we know, your job is not entirely secure, but the strategies in this session will hopefully solidify the fact that you are a valued employee, and then you'll be hired on as a permanent position once you get past this period. Another thing that's really important to remember to know is once you get past, if you do not pass the probationary period and are terminated, you may be eligible for unemployment insurance. When I used to work for the Employment Security Department, and I used to assist people who are on unemployment insurance, and so you are eligible for unemployment insurance after you've been with a company for a period of time, and it's going to fit within this probationary period. And also, if you were terminated or let go from a job through no fault of your own. Write that down in your notes. So if you were let go through no fault of your own, then you are eligible for unemployment insurance. And so if you are terminated based on something that you did intentionally or maybe unintentionally, but it was against the company's policies, etc. That's why it's important to understand what those are. But it was just through no fault of your own. It was not a good fit. You thought you had the skills, but you didn't have a certain skill level that they required, and that's through no fault of your own. So check yourself with that to make sure that that is the case. And applying for unemployment is fairly easy. Everything's online. And then after they process your application, then your benefits will start. You have to do a job search as part of the requirement to receive unemployment insurance. So there's a lot around this process, and good information is found online if you ever find yourself in this position. It's a safety net. It's there for these kinds of situations, and so that's definitely something you would want to take advantage of. But here's the other thing. Oftentimes when an employer brings an employee in, a new employee, and lets them know that they're not going to continue having them employed, they may give you the option to resign. Now, if you do take that option to resign, and their intent is to make it look good, perhaps you can have that option if you choose. But if you resign, that could look like a voluntary quit. And a voluntary quit, you're not eligible for unemployment insurance. So this could hurt you in the long run, but it's completely up to you. Some people feel it's more important that they that they say that they resigned from a position as opposed to being let go. But also keep in mind, there are often times when a job is just not a good fit. And that's usually a good answer when somebody asks, so looks like you were terminated from a previous position. Can you talk a little bit about that? And the key thing is to talk a little about it, not go into a lot of detail, but people can appreciate how sometimes jobs are just not a good fit for the employees as well as the company. So, but just keep this in mind when it comes to unemployment insurance, what your options are. But hopefully things will go well. You'll pass that probationary period. You'll be offered a permanent position. So from that point forward, as you're starting a new job and then eventually securing that position, if they have a probationary period, continue to do well. Take your job seriously. Don't let the excitement of a new job cause you to lose your focus, which especially at the beginning, you get excited about it, and then you lose sight of all these things that you need to be paying attention to. So keep yourself on track so that you don't lose the focus of what you were hired to do. And have no regrets. You can at least look yourself in the eye and say, you know what, I gave it everything I could. I took copious notes. I put everything into practice. And so at least you can have assurance that you did everything that you could that was within your control. And then look for opportunities to go the extra mile. Don't be satisfied. Keep pushing yourself to excel. This is a process that is going to contribute to your work ethic. People notice this. They'll be able to comment on it. It's going to provide you with good references with your coworkers, with your supervisor. So all of this is part of that first 6 months or so of your job where you're learning how to do the job, how to do it well, and then to establish yourself as a valued employee with the company. And you want them to go, man, that was a great hire. This person was an amazing hire because you have done so well. So that is the goal that you are reaching towards. So hopefully these strategies will be helpful. We'll be sending you a PDF of this session so you can have that as a resource to go over. When you start a new job, you just have this great opportunity to start off extremely well. And here's some ways that you can do that. So, so please feel free to use this in the future. That's kind of how it was designed as well. But I want to thank you for joining us. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to my co-host, Jeff.
Thank you, Deborah. So this has been the Complete to Compete program through the University of Alaska. We're glad that you participated. It's a Title III grant program. And again, thanks Deborah for all her work and her time and wisdom. And we will end the recording